final hit single by the English ska revival band, The Specials, also known as The Special AKA, came in 1984, just before the band dissolved. Free Nelson Mandela became an anti-apartheid anthem and even re-entered the UK singles chart in 2013 following the news of Mandela's death. While the lyrics mention 21 years in captivity, it would still be another 6 years before Mandela was set free in 1990. 4 years later, he would win the presidency. The song was the product of a revised lineup of the band after 3 members left in 1981. Many, many, many bands undergo lineup changes. The process of finding replacements for key roles within the band can stall the output of the band significantly. In this particular case, it was 3 years before a new lineup was solidified and a new full-length album was recorded. Bands often struggle with departures because there's no bench to draw from. They must hire new talent. If a business were to go 3 years trying to figure out their lineup after one or more key players left, well, there would likely be no business left. That's why succession planning is so important. Gina Reilly Coates joins me for the first episode of Season 5 of Next in Queue, and we discuss leadership and the role of succession planning, team member development, stretch roles and their impact, preparing for interviews, understanding company culture in interviews, the role of communication in leadership, and a travel and spirits pairing you won't want to miss. Let's get to it. Gina Reilly Coates next in queue. How are you, Gina?
Hi, Rob. I'm wonderful.
I am so excited to talk to you. I think what we are going to talk about today is increasingly important because, as you and I were just talking, we know that sometimes people are looking for new roles or they're looking at roles that are different than where they are today. And we're going to talk a little bit about succession planning and how we as leaders can help make that happen. But before we do that, give us the 30,000 foot view on Gina. Who are you? Where the heck have you been? And what brought you to Next in Queue?
We're going to go a little far back. I was a 3-year-old telling people what to do in preschool, and the teachers called home and say, she's bossy. We want to be the ones to tell the other kids what to do. She's right, but it's our job. And so I appreciate that my mother always saw that as leadership qualities and tried to find ways to foster that in me. And that led me to a lot of leadership positions after, of course, the standard entry level and getting my feet wet. And so I've been a manager, a director, a senior operations manager, a senior director. I've run the gambit of leadership in large operations, in startups, and scaling from smaller to larger spaces, from Fortune 500 companies to education. So I've had a wide range of experience in industries and spaces, but the things that tend to be common for me are operations, leadership, and customer service.
Why should I, as a leader, let's say I'm a leader in an organization, why should I be thinking about, let's start with succession planning? Why should I think about that?
I don't think we talk about that enough, and it's really about where your company is going to grow and go next. There is a huge space for growth and opportunity in every company, even if we don't see it right away. A lot of that comes into play when folks go on leave, folks promote and decide to go somewhere else. as a leader, you need to be prepared for what that looks like for your team to evolve with the company and the company's direction. And you're not always going to be in that one role. Ideally, oftentimes we don't just join a company to stay in one spot. We want to grow and develop ourselves or be challenged in different ways. And with that comes being able to say, okay, if something happens on my team, both positive and opportunity, am I ready to keep the business moving? What does my next leader look like? Because the person that currently may be leading my team or reporting to me, I know they're going to grow and develop or change their direction. Do I have a backup ready? Have I already planned ahead to make sure that I still am powerful and impactful as a team and as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, some leaders may think if I am thinking about helping my team think about their next role, isn't that going to make my team weaker when they leave? What would you say to that?
That's part of the succession plan, right? Like part of it is making sure your leaders and your team and tiers are developing the person behind them so that you're not leaving a weaker team when someone promotes or someone leaves the company. Things can't fall apart because someone is no longer there or no longer doing their role that they previously held. You have to have a bench, and part of that also keeps your employees engaged. We often look at employee engagement as pizza parties, team builders, happy hours. Those can be fun things, but also challenge me, prepare me for the next step, show that you're invested in my development as a person.
Well, let's talk about that. How do I go about developing my people for something outside of what their current role is?
I think a lot of that preparation happens in regular one-on-ones, and I don't know that every leader takes advantage of that time. Sometimes we check a box, you get really comfortable, you're very busy with everything that's going on, but you have prime one-on-one time with someone for 30 to 45 minutes where you get to understand what are the areas of focus that they're really attracted to, what are their strengths, what are their opportunities, where can you give them feedback, and understand what they're looking at next. That's where you start. And then being able to hone in on what that next role requires of them. And so there is a role of us as leaders and managers in understanding how to grow and develop our team. If someone tells you that they want to be a manager, work with them on understanding what the qualifications are for that role so that you can then say with them, here's a plan, here's what you've already done, what you've shown in role, here are the things on your resume that I know you've already completed, here's where the gaps are, let's work together on devising a plan to fill those gaps. These are things that should be led by your employer, the person that is actually looking towards the next space. But as a leader and as a manager, it's really important that you support them in that process.
Yeah, it is very important. And I think something that is often forgotten, quite honestly, when we as leaders are meeting with our team members, we often forget about kind of that future development piece. And we get so focused on here are the current things that I'm working on with my team, right? The current challenges that we're trying to overcome, the current projects that we're working on. And it's easy to, I think we as humans often, we're just bad at long-term thinking. We're really good at right now. And it takes intentionality to make sure that we don't forget the long-term plan, the strategic plan, and work that in as well as the right now.
I love that call out about the intentionality. There's the intention and there's also the ego. Oftentimes, depending on your company culture, you may be in an environment where what you own and what's tied to your name is how you as a leader or a team member get moved to the next level. And what that can create is sometimes unhealthy competition, this feeling like I have to have my name on all of these accomplishments, all of these projects, and that also then limits who you involve in the process. As a leader, we need people to step back and say, you know what, me developing someone to do that really well still is a sign of my strength as a leader, but I don't need to have my name on it or own it or have all of the accolades for it. I can have the accolades come from me developing and growing and having them do a really strong job in delivering, knowing that they report to me or that I am the one that helped guide them through that process.
I'm sometimes I think that sports analogies are a little bit much, but I do think about coaching trees and I don't know, are you a basketball fan? I know you went to UMBC.
I've played a little.
Yeah, okay. I mean, for those that don't know, UMBC, the first 16 seed in men's basketball to ever take down a number 1 seed in 2018. They took down UVA. I thought that my Jayhawks were going to win it all that year, and then Villanova had their lights out game in the Final Four where they couldn't miss a three. Like everything they put up was just went down. That's neither here nor there. What I'm thinking about is in basketball, a lot of people talk about coaching trees, and you get these people that end up being head coaches that learned under this other head coach somewhere. And while that whoever that coach is, right, they can't necessarily take credit for the success at some other school, but people talk about those links to other coaches and how they studied under the great so and so. And I think that can be replicated in organizations outside of sports. It's not about sports. Leadership is leadership.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about stretch roles in places, and they can be really great when they are managed well and there is a very specific and clear timeline and job description, and all parties know what I'm getting out of being a part of this stretch. There's some sort of reciprocity, give and take around how you're delivering and what I get back from that, and you're actually managing the process and experience from week to week and month to month. Sometimes those stretch roles can be taken advantage of, and sometimes employees feel like they are being used for labor, for lack of a better term, to cover a gap. And so I am now in a senior manager stretch as a manager for 3 months until you hire someone else, and then I go back to the role. And so it's on us as leaders and as HR teams to make sure that those roles are beneficial and that we create them when they're truly needed. And there's a path for someone when they complete that stretch role. So similar to a coaching tree, you're learning in that process that you're walking away with real skills. And it's not just that is your bonus, is that now I can say I led this project. How are we making sure that actually team members complete those assignments and feel like they have moved on or gained something tangible and feel the gratitude for their input?
Yeah, and some feedback about how they perform in that, because and I have seen this in the past, I'm sure you have too, someone gets into a stretch assignment and the performance is shaky or not as good as what I want as someone permanently in that role. And it's important that we take that step back, provide that feedback, and then kind of focus on filling those gaps. What were the gaps that contributed to that lack of success, and how can we help you so that the next time you're given that opportunity, permanent or not, that you can be successful?
Absolutely. It's really important to set those parameters initially to say, like, this is also an interview, right? This is their chance to prove that they're ready. But also, part of this process is that I'm going to give you feedback along the way. And as a leader, you need to be able to say and deliver the message, you're not ready, and here's why. Here's what we're going to do to support you in being ready the next time. Or here's where we fell short. Not every stretch assignment is a guaranteed opportunity. It's not going to automatically mean, well, I completed this, so now I move on to a higher paying role. There needs to be very clear parameters set, like at the end of this time we are going to evaluate and discuss the performance. During the process we're going to evaluate, give you feedback, and help keep you on track. This may not automatically turn into the next role. Like, people need to be clear on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk about interviews. I mean, you mentioned the stretch role being an interview, but there's a more traditional kind of interview. And I was just thinking about this morning, that there are some people that have a support system behind them, maybe their family, right, who have gone through maybe multiple interviews, have worked in leadership roles, and can help prepare them for that process. And there are other people who, quite honestly, they just don't have those resources in their family or their friends. How can we as leaders help our people prepare for an interview?
I think that also starts with your one-on-one and your regular check-ins with your team. Knowing on a regular basis what are the things that your team is interested in. They should feel comfortable enough to say to you, there's a role that I've seen that's posted. whether it's in the company or outside the company. Oftentimes it's a lot more comfortable to say if I'm staying with the company, right? No one will say, well, guess what? I'm open to hire somewhere else, even though I'm still here. But being able to say, like, I'm interested in this role so that you as a manager know what your team is looking after. What's their next step? What are the things that they're focused on? So that you're aware that they're even trying to grow and develop so that you can support. Part of that comes with making sure that you have that rapport with your teams, that they're open enough to say, this is what I'm interested in. And then you can have a frank conversation with them, an empowering one, but also being able to say, yes, you're ready, or no, you're not, and here's why. Oftentimes, we immediately say, okay, great, go for it. And we know in the back of our heads that that person may not be ready, but you may use that interview process as a way for them to get feedback from somebody else because it's less uncomfortable. Somebody else that is not attached to them can have the discussion after they have an interview, but that's time, and time is a valuable resource. And when managers send team members to interviews that they are not ready for, that's an extremely poor experience for your team member. You lose trust. They as team members will lose trust in their managers. You let me go up for something that you knew I wasn't ready for and you couldn't just tell me. It's embarrassing, depending on how it turns out and the feedback that they get that says that they're not ready to move to the next level. And you miss an opportunity to sit down with them and have the dialogue and have practice that helps them actually have a powerful or impactful or a better experience and a better interview. Once you know what they're applying for, I think, and you, if you're in support, absolutely have mock interviews with your team. There are resources all over LinkedIn. There are resources that you can share. There's often standard questions that get asked that are basic for any type of interview, no matter your level. Make sure that they're looking for that, they're doing their research, and that they actually have space to practice with you or someone else on the team that has more time if your time is limited. But giving them a chance to practice and get really constructive, candid feedback after they've gone through and walked through an interview is helpful.
Gina, what if they say, well, you can't practice an interview?
I've heard that. And you absolutely can. In life, you can't anticipate every single question that's going to be asked. There are going to be some stumpers. But for every interview, I guarantee you, especially if it's your first interview in a line of other interviews, they're going to ask you to tell you about themselves, tell you about your accomplishments. They may ask about failures. They may ask you to tell me about a time when lots of situational questions will come when you led a project or you led a team. Those are basic standard questions. They may be worded differently, but almost every interview has some form of that. Or walk me through your resume. If you're at least prepared for those or have 2 to 3 stories that you know really well on how you did something positive or led an impact or learned from something, you'll be fine. You don't want to be robotic, but you want to know your own history well enough that somebody asks you a question, you can explain it thoroughly.
I love that you talk about having 2 or 3 stories, because when you talk about being prepared and having those stories at hand without being robotic, really, if you think about it, it is like telling a story. You're telling a story about yourself. And sometimes when we're just trying to kick that story off for the first time, the delivery may not be great, or we may give way more detail than we need, or we don't provide enough detail or enough context. And so that practice of telling that story and gauging feedback can help us deliver it better and better and better. So even though it's something I know very intimately, potentially, the delivery is the part that we're talking about practicing there, right?
There are times that I have practiced in my own mirror. I've recorded myself on a cell phone. I've started a Zoom meeting and recorded myself just so I could watch. How is my mouth moving? Am I comfortable? How long is it taking me to tell this story? Did it make sense when I listened back to it? So if you're not comfortable actually doing a mock interview with a person, start there. Start talking to yourself in the mirror, say things over and over again so that you're comfortable with the details, but you also don't have to have a notepad next to you where everyone can see your eyes moving to the notepad or the other screen, or you're looking down, or you're reading something off of a page. Say things out loud, just getting more comfortable and familiar. Feeling the things that are awkward, the words that don't feel proper in place, the things that don't communicate to the other person the value in your story. Getting yourself out of using acronyms when you're talking to someone who is not on your team or working with your company. So those are great places to start. And then speak to trusted people. You may have friends that you trust to say, this is what I'm working on. Do you mind hearing me answer some questions and just giving me some feedback?
Yeah. It's not just the words that we use and how we deliver them always that is important in preparing for an interview, right? There are some other things that might be helpful if I don't know.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
One for me is also your speed. So guilty as charged around being a fast talker, and so I often have to force myself to speak a lot slower. And so
I'm the yin to your yang. It's fine.
sometimes it's literally how the amount of time that you take to express your story and express the details of what happened. It's also understanding the company and the role that you're looking into. What do they value? What are they looking for? What are the qualifications? Are there things that I can answer that speak to those qualifications? Am I prepared enough? Meaning, not just did I do my research and read through my stories, but am I really ready to take on this next role? Am I asking the right questions myself? An interview is two-way. Yes, the company wants, or the company or the next team wants to hear from you and how you demonstrate your readiness, but also take the time to ask them meaningful questions, not just how much does this role pay, what's the raise if I get this, what are the next steps. Those are basic questions. There are ways for you to find that information out, but what does success look like to you in this role? What do the first 90 days look like? Talk to me about culture and maybe why this role is vacant. Things that are actually showing you're looking into the company. Or I noticed that these are the last things that you delivered or that you have set as visions and goals for the company this year. How do you see this role playing into that? We're looking for someone who is interested and committed to being a part of that team or that company. And so by doing your research and asking meaningful questions, you help yourself stand out as a candidate for that position.
Is there something also to the audience and kind of knowing the audience? And what I say is, right, there are large companies, there are small companies, there are companies that expect a certain level of formality, and there are companies that expect a lot of individuality and kind of come as you are. Have you ever had to coach someone through some of that so that they can be successful based off of where and the role that they're applying for?
Absolutely. Understanding your target audience of who you're talking to is key. Are they formal? How do I show up? Do I need to be in a three-piece suit, even if it's on Zoom? Do I need to be a little more casual and just wear a button up? What's the language that I use? I worked for Amazon, and one of my team members was amazing. He was ex-military, had led people through life-saving measures, literally as part of their training, and he could run a show without even looking. He loved his team. Everyone knew who he was. He was getting into a rut because he kept saying to me, "I keep training the next manager." He was a process assistant at the time. "I keep training in my next boss." And then they stay for a little while and they leave, and then I train somebody else. But I'm ready, and I've been trying to move up, but I can't move up. And so I offered him some time to sit down, and we did a mock interview. He told me his background. We sat and did an interview. Came into my office. I started with the first question, and I believe it was just, "Tell me about your background and why this role, why now?" And immediately I heard why he was not progressing. There was a lot of slang used, just very comfortable, a lot of filler words like, "well, and obviously, and right, and yeah, well, you understand." And when you're in an interview, no, we don't. That is your space to assume the person does not know and does not understand. You need to explain things in a way that are very clear, that they don't have to do the work to determine and ask more questions themselves. And also, you need to show that you are ready to deliver at the level or beyond the role that you are applying and interviewing for. And so if you are a team member, entry level, team lead, and you are applying for a manager role, you need to speak like you are already a manager giving a presentation. And so that is not the space to have your slang, lots of acronyms, the obviously's, the the filler words that are irritating but also assume that the person knows what you're talking about. And so I stopped him after the first question and I asked him that he knew what code switching was. And he didn't. And so I broke it down for him. I was like, "right now, you were speaking like we're friends, we're very casual, and we know each other. I don't know you like that in this space. You need to treat this as a formal interview and that you want to impress me. And so this is where you speak properly. This is where you're very clear. This is where you speak about the things that you've delivered on as if you were already in that role." And I literally broke down for him what that language would sound like and the things that he could not say, even the tone of voice. For some people, depending on if you're male or female or how you identify, certain levels of bass in your voice, knowing who you're talking to, there are ways that you need to deliver that people understand that you know how to show up in different environments. After that meeting, I gave him some time to come back to me, and we prepared for an interview after he practiced and got through and worked on language, and he did well. That gentleman is now an operations manager and has been for several years because he was able to get to an interview and actually deliver value in his statements in a way that people could see, oh, you're ready to be a manager.
It just strikes me that when we actually focus on skills and building skills, and sometimes it's just as simple as I need to demonstrate what this sounds like for you and then give you time to work on it and practice it. That's no different than what we do with frontline customer service reps, right? That's how we deliver. That's how we help them with whatever the basics are that we want them to focus on, whether that's overcoming objections. It may be, let me just demonstrate how I would approach this if I had that customer and that's what they said. And then we practice, right? We do a little mock call and we practice. This whole process that we've been talking about is no different. I think we just forget sometimes that those same skills, or the way that we develop those skills, continues to be transferred up as we climb that, corporate ladder, if you want to use that speak. And sometimes, again, we just forget, and it's important that we don't.
We're busy, right? We work for companies that have tight deadlines, lots going on. Maybe you're short-staffed. There's a lot of change. And it's very easy as a leader to get comfortable because you see how someone shows up in their job every day. And so if they say to you, I'm applying to this role, and you're like, well, I know what they've done. I know their history. I know that they're ready. They'll be great. I know how they talk to customers. I know how they solve problems. I know how they have meetings. They'll be fine. And you don't actually sit down with that person. They go to an interview and they botch it. Sometimes they don't even update their resume because oftentimes there is this notion that, well, I work for you, you know what I do. You have to treat it, even if it's an internal interview, as if you are someone outside the company telling the person that you are interviewing with for the first time or the hiring manager about yourself. You can't assume that they know that, well, they know I'm a specialist or that I'm a senior specialist, so they know what I do every day. No, this is your time to put it on the resume to say, from this time to this time, this is the role that I held, and these were my responsibilities, or these are the things that I delivered on that I'm super proud of. It is your time to brag and say, this is who I am now. Because oftentimes, the last resume you have on file at the company that you're looking to promote within is the very first resume that they received when you applied to that job. And 10 years ago, things have changed.
Right. It's absolutely true. So when you're looking at that next destination, make sure that you update your information that you're bringing to it. Speaking of destinations, I happen to know that you like a little bit of travel. I would like to know, what's the coolest destination that you ever went to? What's your favorite? If you had to pick a place that you were going to go back to, what is that place and why?
So there are a few. I'm blessed to say that there are a few. The most recent, I will say, is South Africa and Soweto specifically. I had just joined my last company. I was getting married, and I had the opportunity to travel to see a new site that we were setting up in South Africa. Our company had the policy that we could bring our plus one, so I brought my husband. So this was an extended honeymoon for us, and it was our first time on the continent. And being able to experience Mandela Square, being able to go through Soweto and see the Freedom Charter, and I'm sure there were some things about the experience that are almost set up for tourists, but there's nothing like being in South Africa and have somebody whisper to you, welcome home. And there is a Freedom Charter where, right after apartheid, where they broke down, these are the things that we believe in, that we're committed to ensure continuity, freedom, and peace, and ensure that everyone has adequate access to basic rights. And as we're reading that, we're listening to a storyteller tell us about how when Nelson Mandela was alive and an activist, it was illegal to talk about him and write about him. And so people would literally get locked up for that. And so what they did instead was talk about him in song. And as they're telling this, and I know part of this is also planned, right? I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now. 3 gentlemen walk in with a guitar. The acoustics are amazing. And they just start singing some Nelson Mandela songs that I've heard as a child growing up. And to hear them singing that and to know that this is how people had to communicate, I just started crying. like the ugly cry rocking back and forth. But it was such a memorable and beautiful experience. The town of Soweto, the history, what people fought through. I've gone back a couple times since with work, but it's an amazing experience to still be able to go back and experience that again. Would absolutely go back again.
I love that answer. Thank you for sharing that. I have a follow-up question. I understand that in addition to being all of the wonderful things that you are in some circles known as the MacGyver of mixed drinks. And I would like to know what you're drinking in Soweto. So what's the drink? Tell us how you make it.
There are a lot of gin-based drinks, and I know gin can be controversial. Like, there are a lot of folks that will say, "Oh, I don't really like gin. I don't like what it makes me turn into." That's not the gin. But I am obsessed with a bee's knees, gin, honey syrup, which is part honey, part warm water. You just warm it up a little bit so it thins out, and fresh lemon juice. Super simple, but delicious and made well when it's fresh. Always use fresh lemon juice.
It sounds a little bit like an interesting take on simple syrup, to use the honey instead of sugar there. And I love a good citrus. Lemon is probably my favorite. But the gin is important in this whole concoction here, right? Because Beefeater is not the same as, I don't know, pick your gin of choice, right? The flavor profiles can be wildly different. Can you talk about that for the uninitiated?
So gin is often a juniper-based spirit, and so one of the fun facts about gin to know is that it does not dilute ice. Ice does not dilute gin when you shake it. Other spirits, the water will break down, but gin gets super cold. And so if you're shaking a cocktail that's gin and ice in a shaker, you'll notice like the frost build on the outside, but the gin will not be that diluted. And so juniper based, you'll often find lots of herbal botanical ingredients in gin. So on the palate, for me, it's a little more herbal, a little more clear and crisp, not as robust and flavorful as a whiskey, but still strong and along that herbal path. Also began as something medicinal way back when it was first established. I want to say monks. I'll have to go back and double fact check that. But it was one of those life waters.
Monks are always involved.
Aqua Vitae was this life water that was medicinal. But now you can find all sorts of different infusions with gin. I have been spending a lot of time, and no, I'm not getting paid for this, but in the Hendrix aisle with their different limited edition batches and releases, from things that are infused in the moonlight that incorporate different fruit profiles. One of my favorites is their Flora Adora, and so it's a mix of floral botanicals and juniper, and so you get like this slightly sweet, heady experience that amazing in a French 75, amazing in a bee's knees.
Okay, you've convinced me, and I am not a gin drinker, but I feel like I need to both go to the liquor store and go hit the citrus aisle at my local grocery store and get some lemons, because I think I'm fresh out of lemons. Gosh, now I'm just thirsty now. Look what you've done.
I've done my job.
You have done your job. You have helped prepare me for my next drink. That is not the same as my next roll, but
just as good.
It is just as good in a much more ephemeral kind of way. Gina, thank you for joining me on Next in Queue. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me. I was thrilled, and I've been using that word a lot lately, but I truly was thrilled to talk to you, especially about succession planning, what it looks like to prepare for internal interviews. I don't think we spend enough time on that. We take it for granted that folks that already work in their position will make it to the next level. People need support.
Absolutely. Next in Queue is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. Theme music is courtesy of Big Red Horse. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with at least one person. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. And thanks for listening.